see the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.
Hi, it's Edwin Rutsch, and this is Dialogs on how to build a culture of empathy. And I'm here today with Laura Zax. And Laura is an editor at the Ashoka Start Empathy.org website. So thank you very much, Laura, for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I'm flattered to be here.
Well, I'm just thrilled to get a chance to talk with someone over there at Start Empathy and to like to just hear about, a little bit about yourself and about your website. And maybe we could start with your Facebook page. I'm on it right now, and there's a little symbol there, kind of a orange and black. And I was wondering kind of what that symbol, your Facebook page icon there is.
Right. The dialogue box. Well, so I guess I shouldn't call it a box, it's a bubble. The dialogue bubble sort of became our logo early on before we even really had an initiative. The idea being we knew we wanted to change the conversation about what skills should be valued in society, and thus also about what skills should be being taught in our school systems. So we often sort of institutionally frame it as changing the conversation. I actually find it easier to think of it as starting the conversation about why empathy, what we really mean by empathy and empathy skills and the empathy skill set, and starting the conversation about how crucial it is today in the 21st century, and even more so 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now.
So that's the bubble on the Start Empathy website. It says Start Empathy, and that's kind of just to start the conversation going.
Exactly. To start the conversation and hopefully have that build into a movement that we feel is already sort of building, both with a little nudging from us and just organically because of work of people like you.
Yeah. So maybe you could give it a little bit of your background. What I did see that you besides being Start Empathy, you're the founder of the Nighttime Adventure Society, and it said, I make music and mischief. So
right.
That sounded interesting.
This is sort of unrelated to my work at Ashoka. I also make indie rock music. I'm an indie rock musician. Yes, so that is actually a side project. I'm an indie rock musician. I call it rollick and roll, the type of music I make. And but I do, I guess, an empathy component to it. I frame it as a society because it's very much about collaboration. So it's not necessarily Laura Zax and a band. It's me and whatever musicians I'm collaborating with. I think that brings out a better product that people are more excited about.
Yeah, it sounds like it's empathic music too. Like when you're collaborating with people, you have to kind of empathize with them and put yourself in their shoes, and you have to listen and play off of them. And
making music with other people is totally an act of empathy. Making music even with yourself, I mean, I'm not the first person to say that learning empathy starts with sort of learning how to express yourself and identify your own emotions. Psychologists have proven that. So yes, for maybe some of my earliest acts of empathy were in learning how to express myself through music. And then there's the collaborative empathy that is making music with other people and feeling them out and doing as much listening as you are playing.
Yeah, because the arts, I think, is so much about empathy, just really sharing yourself and being seen and seeing others.
Yeah, and Ashoka recently held a competition to source educational innovation around empathy. So people who are doing empathy educators, whether or not they self-identified as empathy educators to begin with, who were doing innovative things. And we saw many arts programs, many theater programs in particular, because in theater you are literally stepping, as an actor, you're literally stepping into the shoes of someone else, the shoes of a character. So yes, we did see a lot of art and theater programs in particular.
This was the Activating Empathy competition where you had like 600 applicants, and I think they're down to 15 finalists now.
Right. Actually, I think today we're announcing the winner. So the past 2 weeks has been public voting on 15 finalists, and it's either today or tomorrow that the grand prize winner gets announced. So stay tuned.
Oh, okay. Well, I have interviewed some of the participants there. I think maybe about 5 or 6 of them. So and posted that actually on your site. So okay, so now maybe we can kind of explore the Start Empathy. Do you want to just explore the website, maybe give a tour of it and give an overview? I actually can show it here on the screen as you're talking about it, if you would like to do that. Or
yeah, that would be great. Let's do that. So let's pull up the website. I guess the idea behind the website was we felt like we needed to make the case, and this is very obvious from the homepage, we needed to make the case for why empathy matters. And we also knew that we weren't making the case alone. We knew there were voices out there making the case, so we wanted to aggregate the case for why empathy matters. And also we wanted a home for very practical how-tos. How do you cultivate empathy? And so we're in the process of building that resource center. And I'm even hesitant to call it a resource center. That makes it sound so formal and like it was produced by, a research university or something like that. We're getting mothers, we're getting practitioners, like people who have entered into the empathy competition. We're getting mommy bloggers. We're distilling tips from psychologists. We're making them really actionable and gearing them towards parents and teachers. And so that's the how side of the website. But yes, the basic architecture of the website is why empathy, why do we need it, and how empathy. How do we start it? How do we do it? Because in the circles we run, and we haven't, especially as we've been working with schools, and maybe I should take a step back and talk about a little bit about our school strategy. But as we've been talking with schools, there isn't a lot of pushback. There is generally a lot of excitement and enthusiasm. Yes, we realize we need to start instituting this kind of education, and I can get more specific about what I mean by that as well, into the school day. It's just, how do you do it? And so we realized a great need for practical how-tos, and same with parents. When we approach parents and we talk about this new skill set for the 21st century, and the need for it, not only to, obviously for the end goal of creating a better world, but also for the success of, parents are very concerned about the success of their children, also for the success of each individual child who will become an adult in this world.
Okay, so the website, it seems very kind of friendly. You've got children kind of on the home page, and you start off with why empathy, has some children, and so it has a very kind of a warm, friendly feel to it. And then it sounds like you're kind of going to kind of build the case for why empathy is important, and kind of lay out the case. And then you want to go through and kind of have some how-to steps, kind of a process.
Exactly. And I think our primary audience right now for the website are educators, so teachers and administrators, and parents. So we certainly do hope that some of the why posts that get sort of more into the societal why we need empathy, that some of those posts make their way out to thought leaders, or even are contributed by thought leaders. But yes, you'll notice it's very sort of young people focused. And the idea being, well, number one, young people are the future. I guess the idea being our first strategy is a school's strategy, and recognizing that there's sort of already momentum in educational reform circles for this type of learning. Whatever, some people call it social emotional learning, some people call it the whole child movement. A man named Sam Chaltain, who's been doing a lot of work with and for us, he calls it transformational education. We happen to be calling it empathy education. But we realized there was already this momentum sort of building, and it wasn't unified. And what Ashoka is good at, what we've done for 30 years, is identify innovation and innovators. For people who are listening who are not familiar with Ashoka, what we do is identify our flagship program started 30 years ago, was identifying social innovators, people who are innovating for the social good, and connecting them in a network and kind of leveraging that network to accelerate and magnify the change that these individuals were making. So that's sort of exactly what we're hoping to do with educational innovators, to sort of help them, first of all, self-identify as, yeah, I am an empathy educator, and I'm at the forefront of something big and important. And then B, identify themselves as part of a network of people who are building that who are all together at the forefront of that movement. And then C, hopefully help have that really generate a movement that also, the word we use here is tips, but that also sort of spreads to other schools that maybe aren't the ones who are the model schools right now, but who really want to get there. So that, yeah.
Yeah, so it's really about movement building.
On young people on the website and parents. Mm-hmm.
Oh, so it's so you're focusing on young people and parents and on the schools. So it's about movement building to promote empathy in the schools and the school system, and you're kind of bringing together people who are already kind of around that have that interest, to start networking them, to kind of create the banner, I guess, of empathy to rally around, and then kind of bring in the organizations that already have some kind of connection with that. They're not all of them are using the vocabulary of empathy, maybe social emotional intelligence and others, and then kind of do this movement building, I guess. It seems to be the
right. And key to that also is distilling best practices. So there are people who are doing great. It's not like there's no wonderful empathy education happening out there. It's not like it's a desolate wasteland of, only teaching to standardized tests and only memorizing. There are some great pockets of schools and or programs that are really innovating empathy education. And so we want to kind of collect and distill those best practices so that they're more accessible to the schools that aren't quite there yet, but that want to be.
Yeah.
And I don't want to exclude parents here, and to the parents who are interested in starting empathy in the home today.
Well, Ashoka is a social organization that's been in the what's the field called? Social entrepreneurship, right? It's been organizing social entrepreneurs into this with fellows who are kind of experts in their field or have social entrepreneurial ventures, and kind of networking them together. And now Ashoka has kind of come to the conclusion that empathy is a really important skill and value in society, and is maybe the beginning of real social entrepreneurship. It's like a core value that's needed. So it's like really this. So this is like an initiative to promote that value of empathy, starting in the schools.
Right. So what we've found, we have our 5 selection criteria for fellows that has been around since we first started electing Ashoka Fellows. And Ashoka Fellows are leading social entrepreneurs in any given field, from agriculture to news and knowledge to health to education. We have these 5 criteria, and at some point in the past couple of years, we realized, wait, there's a 6th criteria here, and it's empathy. These people are like really talented, empathetic humans. And I want to take a moment to break down what we mean by empathy, because it can, there's the simple definition, being able to stand in someone else's shoes. And then there are some scientific definitions. So there's, I don't know if you've gotten to interview Paul Ekman, but Paul Ekman says there are 3 types of empathy. There's, let me get them in the right order: cognitive empathy, emotional empathy, and compassionate empathy. Cognitive empathy being, I understand that other people have feelings. Emotional empathy being, I feel along with them. Like, I understand you're having these feelings, and I'm sort of co-feeling them, co-experiencing them. And then compassionate empathy being, I'm co-feeling, I understand your feelings, I'm co-feeling your feelings, and I'm going to act on that. I'm going to design my actions around that. And we're calling that applied empathy. And that's what we're really interested in. And what we see that as, how we see that translating into the classroom, this kind of compassionate empathy, is an empathy skill set, really, that is self-expression, that is conflict resolution, that is creativity, self-management, collaboration. There's a whole host of skills or habits, you could call them, that aren't academic. They're not something that our standardized tests measure right now. It's not arithmetic. It's not, necessarily, it's not your vocabulary. It's not vocabulary lists. But that we really feel, and we found a whole community of people who completely agree, are foundational, not only to becoming a change maker, that's a word that we use, or a very functional and positive person in society, but also at a more micro level, having these skills helps you do better in school. There's actually evidence that shows that students who score better along these kind of pro-social or empathy measures also do better in school. So they do better at academics and do better on the standardized tests. So it's kind of a win-win.
Yeah, well, you were talking about the definitions. I did interview Paul Ekman, and we did talk about definitions for a bit. And he did mention, he said he was really interested in compassion. And he said, to get to compassion, you got to go and study empathy. And he said it's a morass in terms of definition. So it is still, the academics kind of argue over how the word is used, and they use it differently. But
totally.
I think, yeah, your model is something that resonates with me, in the sense I see empathy as, since we're just talking about definitions, is 4 parts. The first part being self-empathy, sensory awareness, mindfulness of our own inner feelings and emotions. Mirrored empathy, which is what you're calling emotional or affective empathy, which is using mirror neurons. So as you're shaking your head, my mirror neurons are firing, shaking their head, and as my hands are waving around, you're kind of feeling the waving of the hands through kind of this mirrored empathy. And then imaginative empathy, which is, the cognitive or perspective taking, where it's more of a based on self-awareness. And then what you're calling, the last part, I can't remember which one it was, but I call it empathic action. So it's as we take action together, to kind of to create our, how we're going to go forward, we kind of work together. And you kind of line up those different parts of empathy and can do empathic action. What was the term you used for that?
Applied empathy.
Oh, applied empathy. Yeah.
It's totally the same thing.
It's the same essence, I think, just kind of different vocabulary, and that happens a lot, and even among academia. So another way of looking at what empathy is using metaphor. And you mentioned that empathy is like, looking through someone else's eyes, standing in someone else's shoes. That's a common definition. And for me, empathy is like a cornucopia, because it kind of opens us up to others' experiences and kind of creates a richness of life. So I'm wondering, from your own creative imagination, what would
Mhm.
be your, your personal metaphor, not using the shoe one or the eye one, but
Right.
what's your metaphor of what empathy is like to you personally?
I like this question. Wow. Uh, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind, and I'm probably going to end up posting on your wall something later once I've gotten to reflect on this. But the first thing that comes to mind is just the phrase like co-dreaming. I think about the movie, was it Inception or Conception? I forget, with Leonardo DiCaprio and Ellen Page, where basically they were in the same, they would dream together. They would literally be, I mean, they were literally asleep and in the same dream together. But empathy is something like that. That's a kind of, it's not really a metaphor. So I'm not exactly answering your question, but that was the first thing that came to mind, co-dreaming. And then, wow, now I'm starting to sound kind of like Jungian, like there's a collective consciousness, and I don't mean that. I guess I just mean some sort of like some sort of alignment, really profound alignment. But let me think more about the metaphor question, and maybe we can come back to it at the end if I feel like I have an answer that's good,
Yeah.
or maybe I'll just end up writing on your Facebook wall, "I got it. This is my metaphor."
Well, that sounds like it's like people dreaming together. Or it's almost like the next step of being in the same dream or with
Right,
each other. It's
exactly.
like I'm in your dream, which is in your imagination and your feelings, and you're in my dream, and it has kind of almost I want to say almost mystical, but feeling, and there's a real connection when we're in that. So far, that works for me as a metaphor.
Good, good.
And as a musician, right? That's the creative mind, kind of like
Right,
how are we, creating that dream world together.
completely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I have a lot of fun with that. So if you kind of scale up that vision, that's kind of like two people in a dream world. So what is it scaling it up to a whole culture of empathy? What does that kind
Right.
of look like?
uh, well, it will involve so much change. I mean, well, I'm gonna, of course, because this is where I'm working, keep on coming back to schools. We keep talking about how we at Ashoka keep talking about, how we need to get these empathy practices embedded in schools, when we need to get principals understanding that it should be a core, something that they're measuring, though there's a debate about whether you can really you really should measure it or not, but something that they should be striving towards for their children, for their students. But then you step back and you realize, well, empathy is modeled, and these teachers whom we're asking to teach empathy, what if they're not receiving empathy from at the administrative level? Or if you step back even further, you have a society that undervalues teachers, profoundly undervalues teachers. So we're asking teachers to model empathy when society itself hasn't offered up so much empathy to the teaching profession itself. So what does co-dreaming look like at a society when you scale it up, when it's not just two people co-dreaming together? It's almost so huge I can't envision it. But and I think it will take a long time. I really, I mean, partly because of what I focus on, and partly because of just my own core belief in the power of education. I think it will take, hopefully, in the next 10 years with the work of Ashoka and our partners, we will have educated a new generation of people who have this skill set. And when they go on to be teachers, they'll teach an even wider set of these people. And and the snowball effect will occur, and the system change will occur, and it will be second nature to value this skill. We won't even need to be having these conversations. But I think that kind of change takes a long time.
Yeah. So it sounds like what you're addressing was kind of that whole societal connection. It's like, the teachers we're asking teachers to be empathic to children, but they're stressed. They're feeling societal stress. So they need empathy. They need empathy from the administration or from the parents. But then the administrators and the parents are stressed, and they need empathy from somebody else. So it's this whole kind of cause and effect kind of chain, and kind of where do you kind of get started? We got to, kind of start that chain reaction so that it kind of passes all the way around.
Right. I mean, and we definitely believe, I definitely believe, it starts really young and really simply with people modeling empathy, one, and with this ability to identify your own emotions and express your own emotions. It's like that simple. But there are, whole swaths of people, because our educational system isn't set up to value that today, that just don't have that basic skill set, those basic skills. But I really do believe it can be that easy. It's just going to take time, because our current educational system has not been set up to teach and reward those skills. And same our other institutional structures, from business to medicine, also haven't been set up to value those, to reward those skills. Though I think more and more business, medicine, and other kind of like large institutions are recognizing that it is a valuable skill, even if they don't have the structures yet to reward it or to be explicit about the fact that they find it a valuable skill. I was just talking with a guy named James Allworth, whom you may have seen his piece, but he wrote something. He's a Harvard Business School grad, and he wrote a piece about empathy was the most valuable thing I learned at Harvard Business School. And so I was asking him, do you see a day when prestigious universities look at, your SAT scores, your extracurricular activities, and also kind of like some sort of measure of empathy? And he said he thinks it already exists in the interview process, that's what the interview process is actually all about, kind of like reading a person's social skills, reading whether a person is listening and responding rather than just telling or lecturing. So to some extent, I think we found that that empathy, that a valuing of empathy is out there. It's just not explicit. It's very implicit right now. And that even teaching empathy is out there, but it's not explicit. It's implicit.
Yeah, that really resonates with me, because I use that vocabulary too, the implicit and explicit, that there's something about giving it a name and really explicitly calling it empathy that kind of gives a shape and a form to it, and it gives you something to kind of organize around.
Right. But then there's the tricky problem, which is it is often, I'm sure you've come across this, confused with sympathy. And I feel like sympathy and empathy are profoundly different. I think, coming from Ashoka in particular, where we see so many people with great intentions starting organizations, starting projects, motivated by sympathy, that just aren't effective kind of solutions to social problems. And what we've realized is that one reason why our fellows, our leading social entrepreneurs, are so effective is because they come from a place of empathic or empathetic change making, where they've really understood the problem from all sides. They've talked with all of the populations whom their solution might affect in order to design their solution. What's more, they engage with the quote-unquote enemy or the competition. They're not afraid to engage with, in a nonprofit sector, I think you may often find people who are afraid to engage with business. Our leading social entrepreneurs aren't afraid to engage in business. They get inside business people's shoes because they realize that, you know, getting Walmart to distribute your idea is going to make systemic change. So that is one that has been one tricky thing we've found in the kind of marketing or messaging of empathy, this confusion with sympathy, which is very different and in some ways harmful.
Yeah, in a sense, I think sympathy can actually block empathy, in the sense that you're empathizing with someone, and instead of just kind of being present and reflecting who they are and where they are, is you kind of take it on yourself, and it becomes maybe a burden, and then you want to start helping. And it actually seems to kind of disrupt the empathic connection. So I think that's a really great distinction you're making between, to really articulate that difference between sympathy and empathy.
And actually, just today on the blog, we've posted, though we're having a slight blog issue. We've just posted a piece written by a young woman who spent 6 years in Cambodia and went through this kind of amazing personal trajectory from sympathetic, she would call it sympathetic volunteer, to over time empathetic, like systemic change maker. So going from Band-Aid solution to real systemic change, and she identified the trajectory of sympathy to empathy as being crucial to that. So maybe attached to this interview, we should definitely attach that post, because she tells a great story.
Oh, great. So Ashoka is really getting a whole team together to work on this project. You're networking with a wide variety of people and trying to use empathy itself as a process for connecting with all parts of society, it sounds like.
Right, yes. Well, our team itself here is pretty lean. So we're trying to do a lot of things with a lean team, which I'm sure you can empathize with. But yeah, we just find that so many different types of people have so many different perspectives on the word and on the place of empathy in society. So you have, PR managers talking about, well, social media makes it so that PR people need empathy, and you have people at Ashoka talking about how, effective systemic change making requires empathy, and you have people in medicine saying, patient-centered medicine requires empathy. So there are just so many different perspectives on it. It is so pervasive. It's not a skill that is limited to one or a few sectors. It is a really foundational skill we're finding, and so we're finding that a lot of people want to talk about it.
Yeah, I just heard a little echo there, but there was that's why I kind of organized myself around building a culture of empathy, that it's really about changing the whole society. And it is so amazing that you go into any kind of field and it resonates with people. You can really talk about it. Like I was talking with the social workers at Arizona State. There's a group that's seen social work, and they've said, well, social work is really about empathy, and it hasn't really even been discussed in the social work, curriculums. And so they're wanting to transition the field of social work to empathy, and kind of make that distinction that you're talking about between sympathy and empathy too, because that sympathy can lead to burnout. And then there's at Purdue. They have the multicultural education, and it's been based on, social justice, privilege and all that kind of stuff. And they're seeing that really the foundation of multiculturalism is empathy. So there's a movement to, transition there. So I'm just reflecting here, saying that there's so many, when you look at society, there's so many areas, and empathy is so foundational to every part of a human endeavor.
Right. I mean, and you can go back to the brain science then to argue the how foundational it is. We have neurons in our brain that make us capable of empathizing. So clearly, it's a crucial skill. Nature wouldn't have designed us this way if it weren't. But it's even more crucial today than ever before because of the way society is changing so rapidly. So, going back to schools, I always do this. The current school system was designed for a world where most people were going to work in factories. And you have this, you have the very clear holdover of the school bell ringing at the end of each period that is a direct transplant from the factory. But today people are no longer going to probably spend most of their lives working in a factory, or spend most of their lives working in a single field with a single company. Just the nature of who we're going to be as people and professionals in the 21st century is so different and so unpredictable that the skills we really need aren't, the skills we really need are to be able to pivot and to be able to bounce off of other people as they're coming up with ideas, and to be able to be thrown into new situations and understand yourself well enough and understand the other people around you well enough that you can figure out how you can contribute. I was just thinking about, so many of my recent college graduate friends are becoming social media managers, right? Which means they're tweeting and managing Facebook pages. That's not something we learned in school. School couldn't have prepared us for that because Twitter and Facebook came to rise so quickly, and even how they're being used is changing on a daily basis. So it wouldn't even have been helpful to have learned in school how to use Facebook and Twitter. What we need to learn is how to be able to respond to how quickly Facebook and Twitter are changing and how other people are using Facebook and Twitter. And again, I'm using Facebook and Twitter as a micro example of like a much more macro theme of just how quickly things are changing. And empathy is key to that, just key to that.
Yeah, it might be a good metaphor for that might be, as a musician, might be jazz, in the sense that it's a very improvised, you have maybe some structures, but you're always in tune with where the other person is and having to respond and interact.
I think you're completely right. Are you a musician?
No, I do kind of freestyle dance and stuff like that. Contact improv. I don't know if you know contact improv, but it's...
I know improv. I don't know contact improv. It's dangerous.
Yeah, you can Google it, contact improv. It's all about physical contact. You're always in contact with the person. It's a totally improvised type of dance.
That's cool. That's cool. It's funny you bring that up because the other day, a colleague, so we're a global organization, and a colleague came in from Israel, and I hadn't seen him in a while, and so we hugged, and it was like us in the midst of all this empathy work. It was a reminder of like human contact and how simple that is, and yet how absent it is in so much of our daily lives. And I think I'm becoming a firm believer in the fact that it shouldn't be so absent. I mean, obviously everyone has their own sort of boundaries, but there's something, again, so fundamental about physical contact, and how at a scientific level our bodies respond to it. Oxytocin. You hug someone, you get some more oxytocin.
Oxytocin, yeah.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
I pronunciate those words that you learn from reading you don't know how to pronounce.
Yeah, I'm interviewing Paul Zax tomorrow, so he just has a new book out, The Moral Molecule. So he's kind of a real explorer of the nature, the oxytocin and all the ways of hugging and having your pet, holding your pet and all the things that, facilitate that.
Right. And yes, and so what we're doing is, there are these experts out there, and for the, diehard empathy enthusiasts among us, like you and me, we can find all these people talking about empathy because we have the empathy Google alert or whatever. But what we're hoping the website will do is really distill and make digestible the most actionable and compelling kind of arguments for why we need empathy and how you can start empathy, so that the people out there who, don't know who we're talking about when we say Paul Ekman or when we say Jeremy Rifkin can still begin to cultivate empathy in their own homes, in their own schools, and even in themselves. So that's going back to the website, the purpose of the website, to really popularize this.
Yeah, so how do we go from it being so kind of not abstract, but the core group, to really engage all of society and make it something that's easily accessible? Because most people don't have the time to go into the detail, and
right.
they need something that's kind of accessible.
Right.
So you're really wanting to make your website accessible for kind of the average person to kind of engage in the dialogue.
Exactly. And in particular, parents and teachers who, as we've spoken to many of them through the past, I guess, year of building this initiative, we've just heard again and again, like, yes, but how? Like, what do I do today? So that's one thing we're really trying to do.
Okay, well, this is a great connection. I'm so glad to have a chance to chat with you, get to know you a little bit personally, and kind of your interests as well as the website. Are you like full time on the empathy part, or?
I also do a little bit of looking for new fellows, new leading social entrepreneurs in the U.S. specifically. So I spend a lot of time on empathy. And then also spend some time finding new leading social entrepreneurs in other fields entirely.
Well, when I've asked people, how do we build a culture of empathy, something that people said is start a dialogue about it. And I think your bubble kind of represents on your Facebook, on the site, right? There's all these people under the Y, and there's the little bubble about it. And for me, that really is about the dialogue part. Is that if we just start talking with each other and kind of get the whole society just into a dialogue, that's kind of just one step in terms of promoting empathy. And so I'm really grateful for you taking the time to dialogue about this, and I have a sense that we'll kind of continue the dialogue well into the future. And
whether on Skype or Facebook or Twitter or what have you.
Yeah. So okay, then unless is there anything else you feel it needs to be covered, or?
I don't think so. I think we're good.
Okay. Okay, then I'll be putting this online in a couple days, and we'll post it on our site and send you the link, and look forward to keeping the conversation going, taking the next steps.
Great, a pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you. Bye.
See the world through other people's eyes. Empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.